Okay. All right. Let's bear with me a second. Okay, well, let's bring the meeting to order at 5:09 here on March 9th, 2023, for the purpose of discussing the specific plan for the Glaser property. We do always have a public comment for items that are not on the agenda. I'm guessing that there are a bunch of people here who would like to speak, and I'm also going to assume that most of the comments are about what we are here to discuss tonight. Is there anybody here who would like to address the board on something that does not have to do with the Glaser property? No? Okay. Anybody online? You can raise your hand, raise your electronic hand.
So far, no raised hands and no chats on Zoom.
Emily, do we need to unmute if we're talking?
No, if the light is on, it's active and
Okay.
you don't need to adjust them. They have pretty good range.
Okay. So next is the review of the minutes from the last meeting. Has anybody on the board or anybody or everybody reviewed the minutes? Any comments on amendments, inaccuracies? Everybody okay with the minutes? Okay with the approving the minutes? A quick show of hands on aye or nay. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4. Anybody online?
No committee members online.
No committee members online. No nays? 1, 2, 3, 4. We have four ayes, so the minutes of last meeting are approved. I'm making this up as I go along, guys. Okay, so questions for tonight's meeting. Emily, I assume you put this together. So does the proposed open space satisfy the criteria for substantial public benefit? And we're going to refer to the Planning Commission's finding of facts.
Mhm. Yeah, so I put these questions together with Ken and the applicant team for this project to move forward and working through all the charge items. There's kind of the overarching design elements, the roads, the open space layout, and then a lot of the details called for in the charge precipitate from there, figuring out the big picture, working down to the details. Given that we have also Windswept Farm on the agenda tonight and a lot of people here from the public, I would probably suggest reversing the agenda items and going through the Windswept Farm stuff first, and then maybe do growth management if there's time and talk about that at the end. But to have these two questions in mind as you think through the overall site plan, and we can circle back on them at the end.
So I think that's a great idea.
So we're going to do Windswept Farm now instead of the growth.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll try to be as brief as I can to give as much time for discussion. So the Planning Commission set out a charge to think about substantial benefit as open space. And there's a couple aspects to the open space. The view shed along Mountain View Road that's specifically called out in the town plan. And then more general goals in chapter 13 of the town plan to protect open areas like wetlands, forests, and preserve working landscapes. When I say Windswept Farm, what I'm referring to is the about 5 acres that Mike and Tina own with the barns. But Windswept Farm does utilize the larger land holdings that Jack Glaser owns, and they lease it. So I think thinking about that as Windswept Farm is their land holdings that's separate from Glazer's land, but these properties are interconnected and operationally intertwined. At the end of the day, the committee's focus is transmitting a site plan and some general bylaw amendments to the Planning Commission that leave the door open for preserving the view shed, preserving the working landscape, and not get too tied up in the weeds of how that would then be conveyed or leased to Windswept, because that's ultimately beyond the scope of conserving an open space asset and beyond the scope of these committees. That would fall in the real estate land holdings jurisdiction of the select board. So I think keeping that the site plan leaves the options open for Windswept Farms' continued use for view shed preservation, working landscape is where the focus should lie for the committee. And Mike and Tina have provided some information about their operations as well as a site plan. And there have been several comment memos received to date and uploaded on the agenda page. And I can refer to any of those as needed.
So with that in mind, shall we go right into public comment about Windswept Farm?
Probably. I think the first thing I would like to hear is from Mike and Tina, if this site plan allows them to have that operations, their continued operations, and can.
Perhaps we should put the site plan up.
Hold on one second.
Great idea.
Hang on one
I'm
second.
sorry.
Is that the right question?
I don't know, maybe not.
Let me toss that out to the board. So you heard Emily, the question that Emily just posed. Does the development site plan that the Glazers are currently proposing, is it will it work? Will it work for Mike and Tina? So, okay, so let's explore
Mhm.
that.
Thank you, Scott. So what I was going to suggest was that perhaps it might make some sense that this is the most recent edition of the site plan. So we've made some changes since the last time. We could go over them quickly, what some of those changes are and how in particular they pertain to the open space provision or question, which is really the linchpin of the substantial public benefit. And I know that the Mouses have also submitted a plan of their operations. It seems to me we should look at both of them and try to understand how those two things either work together or don't work together, as the case may be.
So
That was what
I think it's a great idea. Why don't you walk everybody through the new plan?
Okay, so Emily's got it up there on the screen. So we made a couple of changes to the plan. This was the plan that we used to submit with our growth management submittal. Why don't you do that? You know how to work.
And I'll try to do the annotate for Zoom folks too.
So a couple of things. Number one, so when you look at the plan, understand that north is on the right-hand side of the page, right? It's kind of turned sideways. One of the comments at the last meeting was, if you recall, we had 3 different development areas. And there was some concern that there was that little area along Old Stage Road, and that somehow that would be sort of this isolated thing. So we've removed that. And so that's no longer there. And as part of that, what you end up seeing is the open space area that would be there along Mountain View Road and then turning the corner onto Old Stage Road, that becomes larger. So when we were originally in front of the Planning Commission, we were talking about roughly about 11 acres plus or minus in round numbers. So this now, what does this go to now, Brian?
It's just over 15.
So it goes over to 15. The other part of that is that, and this is being offered to be dedicated to the town, no cost to the town. In terms of the view shed, it expands the area that's would be outside of development, both in terms of the additional acreage that would be dedicated to the town. And then also you can see there's that wetland area that, over on the coming off of Old Stage Road. So you're gonna have a substantial area that there won't be any development in, which I think we would make the case that that intensifies the amount of protection over the view shed. The view shed, of course, is identified in the town plan as being something that the town desired to protect. So that would be one thing that I would point out in that regard. So eliminating that third smaller development pod, that results in expanding that open space area. And then the development area falls into these two areas. I don't want to get too far into the growth management proposal, but we've provided a wider array of housing options that are included in there, but we'll save that for the growth management piece. But essentially that's it in a nutshell. That more southerly sort of light green, Kelly green area is largely unchanged. Yes, Brian, it's largely unchanged.
About 42 acres.
And then there's the other thing is I would point out that dark green area that kind of goes between the two development areas. That's essentially a class 2 wetland with its associated required 50-foot buffer around the wetland. And so that's our site plan, in a nutshell.
Okay, so we were at 110 units before we eliminated those 3 triplexes. I believe there's also a concern of the affordability potentially being clustered in that isolated area. That's been eliminated as well. We did pick up, we're at 106 units now. So we were at 110, we dropped the 9, and then we added back 5 or 8 to get 106. So we're at 106 now. We were able to move some units around, change the spacing a little bit, and get, I believe we added 2 duplexes to the southern loop, and we added 1 duplex to the northern, is how we picked those up. But the roadways are essentially the same.
Okay. Anything else, Ken?
But in terms of the open space discussion, that's, really trying to focus my comments there on the impacts on the open space, since that seemed to be the question we were trying to address right now.
Emily,
Mhm.
next. Where would you suggest we head from there?
I guess thinking about, question number
I
1.
I do apologize. I'm going to ask you some leading questions because I showed up not expecting to be chair.
Yep, that works for me. I'm cool with it. Yeah. So does the proposed open space satisfy the criteria for a substantial public benefit? Remembering that specific plan defines an open space substantial benefit as conserving 1 or more open space assets identified in the town's comprehensive plan or other asset acceptable to the conservation and planning commissions. So that gone from about 11 acres to 15 acres of view shed, and then about 42 acres of that pasture and forest area. And that chapter 13 does call out scenic view sheds and working landscapes as goals for conservation.
So why don't we open up to the board, I'll open up to the members of the board. How does everybody feel about the open space as it is currently presented? Anybody wish to comment on that or ask any questions?
I
about
have
it?
a pre-question to that, which is in the memo from staff on charge 7 and 8. There's a comment that says the open space should be given to the town with little or no restrictions. And then goes on to say, would be the responsibility of the select board to decide how it is or is not used. I know we're talking about this as being given as open space, but I'm just not sure with that language, what could the town turn around and do with that? Is it being conserved as open space, or does little or no restriction mean it could become the community center? Could, they later sell it? I just want to, that kind of underpins the
So
discussion.
that's a good question. Save your two other questions for a second and kick that over to Ken. And can you describe what can be done with that area, if anything?
So that area, the bulk of that area, not all of it, but the bulk of it is, was delineated as being class 2 wetland. And I
Okay.
know we've made comments in other meetings that there's probably some upland in there, but in our view, it was a wash to try to tease it out. And understanding that this was being offered as an open space area to the town for the purposes of allowing Windswept Farm to continue, it didn't make any sense to spend additional time and resources to be looking for tiny little upland areas within that wetland area. So to the extent that it's a class 2 wetland, under the state's wetland rules, agricultural uses can continue to operate there. But the odds that you would be able to put a building there would seem to me to be pretty low. I mean, someone could do a more detailed delineation, perhaps find an upland area to put it there, but in terms of doing the constraints analysis, knowing what we know about these things, the odds of being able to locate a building there would be relatively slim. As Emily has pointed out, ultimately, the decision, first of all, to accept the land goes to the select board.
Right.
And then, which means the town owns it. And then the select board decides how they want to use it. We're offering it free and clear. So, so just assuming that we were able to move forward, we would dedicate the land to the town, and then, the town's in charge. The town would get to decide. What I would suggest would be for the committee and the planning commission, if you really want it to be preserved as open space, to make a recommendation to the select board. Understanding the select board, they're the deciders, but you get to make a recommendation. It's like, we spend a lot of time talking about this, thinking about it. These are our thoughts on that. We recommend that it be done in this way. I would imagine that would carry some weight with the select board, till they vote, we don't know, but I would imagine that would carry some weight with it.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, no, and I think that you're right on, and I'm agree with you completely, and think that should be one of, when this is all said and done, that would be one of the things we would communicate to the planning commission. So does that answer your question?
I think.
The question one?
I think so, yeah. It is, I guess, I think later we're supposed to talk to the select board, so we can get their opinion at that point. So, yeah, I think.
What was your, so you said you had 3 questions, so that was one.
No, no, I think that was it.
That was
Did I-
it.
Did I say 3?
No, I thought you did, but
Okay.
Frequent.
Oh.
Yeah. There was a pre-question before we get into it, because if that wasn't in my head, I needed to get that done before. So, okay, I'm good.
other questions from the board?
Just a real quick follow-up question to that. Does that mean that this is class 2 wetland? That means that the select board doesn't have a choice but to use it for agricultural purposes? They can't build anything there theoretically,
well,
if it is all class 2.
it would be subject to the state's wetland rules. And of course, the town has its own regulations as well, but it would be subject to the state's wetland rules. So
Because then the short answer to Kyle's question would be a no. No to a rec center, no to all sort of buildings because it's wetland.
Right.
And that would come back to a recommendation by the board stating that this board thinks that that any land dedicated to the town should come with a conservation easement on it. They don't have to do it, but that would be a recommendation.
I kind of feel like there is something that is not being communicated. Can I just jump in and tell me?
Please.
So the land as it currently is, we did not do an intensive investigation to see if there were sites that were buildable. Mike has already told me there are places there were buildings in the past on that land. We didn't want to look at it more carefully. There could be a place to put a rec center. We don't know. So rather than saying nothing can be done with it, I think that is way too definitive a statement in order to make about this land. There could be other places if people wanted to investigate more carefully that could support buildings.
So to expand a little bit on what Jack's saying, if you want to draw a line through the wetland delineation that's shown, Emily, there's a line behind the buffer that kind of starts on the western mid spot of the Moss property.
Right here.
About where you finish there. That's where the delineation started, and then it went along the rear of the Moss property.
Right here.
Yep. So that is the class 2 boundary that we delineated. Once we figured out that that edge was gonna be there, we just said, well, we're not
You
gonna
didn't
go
go
any further
further.
to the south. We had
So
some
it was,
way out.
it was
for it.
wet to that, you were dry and then you were wet to that line.
Correct. So there may be some high areas, especially to the south end of the Moss property, that kind of is in between the Moss and Turtle Pond Road there. We didn't delineate there. We didn't do any further investigation. There might be some high areas there that Jack's alluding to that could be built on, or potentially could be. But we didn't do any further investigation to the south because we weren't planning on putting a public road through there or
Yep.
making the units part of it, so.
Right. So mechanically, the way I see this playing out is say we're good with this one and it moves forward and the specific plan is approved. The DRB would be approving this as a subdivision site plan with those areas as open space. So in ag rural, we have that open space set aside as its own lot. It would be just like that. You can do ag and forestry in your open space, but you can't then go back to the DRB and further subdivide or put a house on it.
But Emily,
Mhm.
just as a clarification, in this case, so when we do that on the DRB, it's open space, but in this case, it would be dedicated to the town. So does it become a subdivision? I mean, it's a subdivision, it's already a subdivision, but that land will in turn be away, it will not be part of the home ownership association. It will
Yeah, it would
become
be,
part of
it's
the
its
town.
own parcel, its own open space parcel. It would probably have, part of DRB have a irrevocable offer of dedication. So then the town would have the right to then claim it. And then that's where this second committee recommendation that we want to see, maybe we want to see some restriction that a community center couldn't be here, or we don't want the town to do something that would detrimentally go against the original goal, which is an open space asset for working landscaping, forestry, and view shed. And maybe there's some squish in there, but conveying that to the select board. If you take this irrevocable offer, here's our list of recommendations. Work with the windswept farm, maybe put some restrictions on how it can be used, et cetera. Mechanically.
It seems to me, I know you've mentioned that, take an irrevocable offer to the town, but it does seem to me that if the town is going to conceivably work with Windswept Farm, that they're going to have to exercise their irrevocable offer to have it within the town's possession to in turn possibly lease it to Windswept Farm. Right? It wouldn't work if they didn't have control. Or if they didn't exercise. Maybe this is a little bit in the weeds, but I'm making this point for a reason.
Right, and I've thought a lot about this, and I think it boils down to the word conserve, and it says conserving one or more open space assets. And conserve can be a lot of different things. It can be an open space set aside as part of a subdivision that's then retained by a landowner or a homeowners association or conveyed to the town. So at the baseline, they're conserving an asset through a subdivision. And then there's these additional levels that could come, beyond that. But without, having the select board engage in a real estate proceeding, there's really no guarantee. There's no guarantee that a permit is approved until a permit is approved and has gone through the appeal period. So we'll never really know until we get fully through the process. But I think setting it up where this layout protects the view shed, it has land that Windswept Farm can continue to use. The town would then have an irrevocable offer. It keeps all of those doors open to set it up for success. And that's where the committee's focus should be.
Lisa, did you have? a
Yeah,
question?
I just have a process question.
Mhm.
So tying our charge to this discussion, I mean, I understand it says the open space given to the town is considered automatic as part of the substantial benefit. This, by the way, is number 8 under the Windswept Farm continued operations. Explore the arrangements that would have the outcome of allowing continuation use of Windswept Farm. So Tina provided some very useful information there. We're going to have that conversation now. Provide an accounting of the options and the pros and cons. What does that last sentence mean in this context?
So let me pull that up, just so I'm looking right at it. This was where, leasing the land back to Windswept Farm is an option, but there could be other options. Maybe some of that open space the town thinks should just go directly to Windswept Farm. Maybe a land trust or another entity would be involved. Maybe there's another arrangement beyond just a lease that we're not aware of, and try to give a broader scope to the select board. So if they're presented with this irrevocable offer to take this land, some level of groundwork has been done for them.
So we need to go into the weeds some then to do this pro and con list.
Maybe a little bit, but I don't think it needs to be a major point of perseveration for the committee. And that's why originally it was drafted to just focus on like the nitty gritty of a lease agreement, and the planning commission backed out the scope to just do a general accounting of options. And this is probably something that, Ken and I can draft and then present to you for consideration.
Okay. Well, that's helpful. I mean, the only thing I would like to hear tonight is the numbers, how many people are engaged with Windswept Farms, because I think that'd be part of this pro and con list. If the town is going to manage this asset in a way to support this, how many people is this impacting? I think that's an important number for me to hear. So beyond that, thank you.
Mhm.
How many?
How
Is that what
many?
you want? How many?
Well, no, I mean, as we get into the discussion of the Windswept Farm,
Well,
so to work through your comments later on.
we've been in operation for about 40 years,
Mhm.
and there's 28 horses. And out of those 28 horses, some of them are windswept, and we lease them out and we use them for lessons and camp.
I guess when I say how many people, how many,
So, yeah, getting
Willistonians.
there.
Oh, sorry.
So, of the other, so there's about 18 other horses that are privately owned. And so there's 18 people, but some of those horses are half leased. And probably for every horse, there's probably 1, 2, 3, 4 people that are involved with that horse. And then we have people that come into the farm, the pet horses. We have people that are looking into therapeutic horse. We have a psychologist that brings people in and does therapeutic sessions. I'm a camp. I count 98 kids that I see through the summer. And I've had that camp for 28 years. So it's a lot.
Yeah. That's helpful.
Number fluctuates, as you can tell, because there are more people in the camps in operation. Fewer people in the camp is not in operation.
Right.
And then also, these young people that you see are teenagers coming through, and then they'll go to college. and they'll become professionals. And Kathy's daughter has gone through and is at Dartmouth now, being a doctor. So as the kids come through, they start at camp. They start as 7-year-olds at camp. I may never see them again. Or they stay, they take lessons, they half lease one of my horses, they get really involved in it, they buy their own horse. Then some of those kids that buy a horse leases their horse out, and then they go off to college, and sometimes that horse stays. So it's a huge number.
Thanks, that helps.
Is that helpful?
Yes, very much so.
And the kids work there, yes. So these young people here have gone to camp, they've leased my horse. Now they're leasing horses. Rory owns her horse. And they are my camp staff. And they do chores. Yeah, they walk from Williston Central, and they show up on Wednesdays when Williston Central has a short day. I have a mob of kids coming up, and they don't just hang out, they actually work. Yeah.
Once you get to the public comment section, actually, I think some of these girls, want to explain what they're involved in and what it means to them. But that'll be.
So let me ask you a question, and I did read it. I did read some of the documents that were presented to the board. Maybe you could describe to the board as well as the audience how the land that would be conserved, that I guess you're currently using, how the land that would be conserved, would you continue to use it? So how would it benefit you?
All right, so if you look at the map up there, and you can see my property delineated, and then you can see kind of a rhomboid shaped piece. That's all pasture land. And Jacob and I have spoken about that, and that's the focus. Thank you, Emily. That's the focus of a lot of his input into this. He wants to see the farm continue. If we continue to keep that pasture land, we can stay in business. If that pasture land for some reason is removed from the equation, then we go out of business. We've been haying all of the land. So if you go to the far right, and we just passed the wetlands on your map. Right in there. So we've been haying all that land. So I've actually lived there 50 years because I was there when it was a dairy farm as well. But we hay that land, and that's provided hay. However, we can buy hay. So it's not a deal breaker in that sense. We can continue to operate on purchased hay. But we cannot continue to operate with an absence of pasture. Because without the pasture, no one would want to board a horse. Because they are an animal that needs to be outside and move around.
Also, the pasture land needs to be next to the barn. You can't, it would be really hard to walk the horse if the pasture land is away from the barn.
But it has to be contiguous because you're moving 1,200-pound animals a distance. And it would take an enormous amount of time if the pastures were not contiguous. So it wouldn't work, basically. It's too labor intensive to walk huge distances.
And does this, you had made a comment about the proximity of the horses to the development. Could you just elaborate on that? Was that a concern, or
there is a concern? Mainly it's a safety concern. So what I would like to see, if the development comes to fruition roughly as it's shown on this map, there actually is a line that comes right along, and it's a very thin line. I'd like to see that as kind of a buffer area, because that keeps extraneous people away from the livestock. So, and as an example, you wouldn't want someone to walk into a pasture and walk their dog.
And let me interrupt you for 1 second and
Yes.
just confirm that that line that he is referring to is the 50-foot buffer line, Ken or Brian?
I think it's probably the actual wetland line, would be my guess.
And so is that the line
The
that
solid
that
line or
arcs
the
up and
dashed
around
line?
the left-hand side of the development?
Yep. The solid one is the actual wetland, the dash.
Oh, it
one
can, the
is-
dash one's a 50-foot buffer
That's the 50. Yep.
Mhm.
and are in,
So we would need extra space for.
Right, I think,
So we
and
would,
Mike, are you? So you would like to see a buffer line between the houses and the pasture land?
Then it could be a hedgerow of some sort. It could be pine trees, just something. So the thing that crosses into my mind is that I've seen people, they'll mow their lawn and they'll throw the lawn clippings over the fence to the horse, assuming, well, it's grass and the horse will eat it. The problem is that if you stick your hand in a pile of lawn clippings, it generates heat,
mm,
so it's fermenting. And then it can actually cause a colic issue with a horse. So if you have a little buffer line in there, so people aren't tempted to do things that they think are to the horse's benefit, but truly are not. Now, then we won't have those issues.
So you have a bunch of signs that say, don't feed the horses.
Exactly.
yeah, you also have a problem with people drawing the horses to the fence to pet them.
Doing what?
Drawing the horses to the fences to pet them. And that's a danger to the horse because the horse gets too close to the fence and they can hook a leg around it and then get themselves
You
hurt.
know, and that buffer area will prevent those issues.
Okay.
yeah, and I think this is a spot where if this moves forward to discretionary permit, our bylaw is well set up to handle stuff like this because we deal with trying to keep people out of wetland buffers.
Right.
And so I think, the mechanics and the details of that will naturally come along at that phase of review.
Something I just thought of is that this map is not totally a representative where we have our pasture land, because these houses are in the pasture land. And there's 7 horses in that pasture, so we would have to reshape our pastures. We'd have to rebuild our fence lines, which is extremely costly. When this is done, we need to change our farm, put the expense of changing our farm, so it's permanent. And not, it shouldn't change.
But the bottom line is that these are things that are doable, so we can continue to remain in business.
Yes.
Question. Thanks, Tina, for clarifying that. Are you referring to number 3 on the map?
Yeah, so this was me trying to take the hand sketch and overlay it on the site plan.
Yeah,
The thr-
pasture, right now, this pasture, there's a pasture that comes out to here. Right?
Yeah, it's not quite that.
And what's the number 3?
3 stands for about 3 acres.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, the numbers are acreages.
Yeah, we actually don't use that much.
So I'm going to point out something that probably is not going to endear me to anybody here, but I want the audience to hear this, okay? And it stems from your comment about your comment about having to change your pasture land. And I think this is important for everybody to keep in their minds, that the Glazers, the applicant, has the right to develop their land. Okay, so you can't tell them they can't develop their land. Whether they go through the specific plan process that we are in right now, or they go through the regular process that puts them in front of the Development Review Board, it's their land. So this process we're going through this process because we think that there is a substantial, the select board, the planning commission thinks that there is a substantial public benefit to the town by keeping this space open. Really doesn't have a lot to do with Windswept Farm. It has to do with the green space that you see on your map. Whether it is leased to Windswept Farm, that's a whole nother story. All right. But keep in mind when it comes to the comments that they do have the right to develop their land. It is developable. The white area is, assuming the wetlands delineation is correct, it's developable land. And according to the bylaws of the town of Williston, they can do that, whether it's here or through the other process. So just keep that in mind when it's your turn to speak, okay?
May I expand on your comment?
Please.
Jacob and I have sat down together and he has been very, very amenable to try and adjust this in such a way that we
Great.
can stay in business. And I've worked with him now for many years because I've leased the land. And I want to reiterate that I think that he, as the owner, he has the complete right to develop, and he has gone out of his way to try and help us.
That's great. That's good. That makes the process that much easier. Yes, Ken.
So just to kind of get at this question a little bit differently. So to Mike and Tina, given the plan that we have shown there, and I know, Tina, you've articulated how you would have to make some changes to configuration. With the plan that we have shown, would that layout work for you in the continued operation of Windswept?
Yes, definitely.
Yes.
Okay.
Without any question.
Anybody on the board have any questions or comments based on that exchange? Okay. So with that said, want to open up to the audience?
That sounds good.
Let's do that. So if you would like to make a statement, a couple of ground rules, if you wouldn't mind. If the person in front of you who just spoke took all the wind out of your sails, you do not need to repeat them. You could just say, I agree with them. Okay? We have about 40 minutes left. So if you can do it without repeating what other people are saying, please.
And say your name. And say your name.
State your name and your address for the record as well when you come on up. Who would like to be first? Sir.
Hi, I'm James Heltz. I live at 487 Wildflower Circle. I actually just have two questions. The first one, if the goal is to preserve the view shed, so why is there a parking lot that's now being built at the very head of the view shed? As you're driving up, there's now going to be a 12-space parking lot and a road. It seems like that should maybe be tucked somewhere else.
So let's let the applicant answer that.
So the parking area, we're responding to questions having to do with how the town might utilize this space as a public park, and whether there would be a place for people to be able to park to access it. We had a discussion about how you really can't park along Mountain View Road just because it kind of drops off. If you've driven down there, you no doubt know that. And so that was us responding to that.
But couldn't it be further down the road, more where the development is, instead of right there? I mean, that's going to be the first thing you see is a bunch of cars.
Well, so the idea is that this would be part of the open space that would be given to the town, and then it would be owned, operated, and maintained by the town, not necessarily as part of the residential development. So what I would say about it at this point is it's conceptual, and the devil's in the details, as they say. I'm sure you know. So it's something that we threw out in response to the comments that came from the committee.
Okay.
Would it have to be that sort of crescent-esque shape? I don't know that it would have to be. It's an idea to consider.
And then this,
Sorry, I think, could it be slid down a little bit? I think, yes, it could. It's about 10 feet lower than Mountain View is now. So if you're thinking tops of cars. would be below
Like I said,
the-
trying to preserve
Central.
a view shed, and also you have a
Sure.
parking lot, so it doesn't seem to jive with me. But the other question I had is about the class 2 wetland. So if that can't be developed, regardless if you gave it to the town or not, it still won't be developed, correct? I mean, because you can't build on it. And
That's really a negotiation between the applicant and the select board through a legal document.
Well, I don't mean that. I mean, as far as the land itself,
Well, I think if you had heard Mr. Bellevaux saying that there were some upland areas on that parcel that had buildings on them at one point in time. So it's possible that you could build on some of that land if it was outside of the wetland area.
but if you had to build roads connecting. to
Yes, and
those,
you're allowed to do that in certain cases through the Vermont wetlands.
A road.
And the whole northern undeveloped view shed, I think the applicant has said they're underdeveloping this quite substantially compared to what you.
I do think, and, without being able to say so for certain, that if this process makes it all the way forward and the board recommends to the planning commission and the planning commission recommends to the select board that this be kept as permanent open space, there's a good chance that probably will happen.
Right. I am more talking about to the left,
Well, that would fall into the same,
the white wetlands.
that
The
would
one on
fall
the
into
right,
the
I
same,
realize is
that would
probably
fall into the same
developable.
category.
You can develop, but I know the one on the left
Yeah.
says wetlands. Okay, those are my two questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Who is next? Don't be bashful.
There's somebody online waiting.
Is there someone online, Emily?
Yeah, Ian, let me get you set up here. Hi,
Okay.
Ian.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Sorry, I'm out of town.
Ian,
Otherwise, I would
Can you
be
state your
there.
name and address, please?
Sure, here. I'm Ian Campbell. I live at 117 Hannon. That's in Brennan Woods.
Great, thank you.
So I just want to ask some very basic questions, and I apologize if it should be all clearly laid out in the paperwork, and I should have been able to figure it out on my own. So we have the 17 acres of pasture land, which is directly surrounding the Mouse's property, and which is requisite for them to continue operating because animals graze there. It's where riding takes place and so forth. So I guess my question is, from what I've read, the whole concern about whether that could then be used by the Mosses is what's going to happen once it transfers over to the town. Does that actually need to happen? Is there a legal course of action where it could be put into some kind of a trust under the Glazer's names, saying that, as long as there is a viable operation at the Windswept farm, that they can continue to use this and it'll be left undeveloped, and they will simply use it. The Mosses have indicated they have a line of succession. There are also unwritten many people who are interested, if it becomes necessary, to become materially invested in a public trust option. Again, those are just options if the whole special permitting, the special assessment falls through. But to go back to the question of the burden on the town and not knowing what a future select board might do in the 2030s, 2040s, and say, we don't see the benefit of a horse farm, even though there's still a very viable operating a business there. What are some of the other options other than having it be the town taking over that land, the Mosses and Windswept answering to them, as opposed to it being something which, again, is under the Glazer's name, but is intended to be left undeveloped because of the needs of the farm. So that's it. Thank you.
So I think first, those are great questions and kind of strike to the heart of this whole discussion. I do think that the applicant, the Glazers, have stated that they are willing to deed the property to the town. So that may take it out of the idea of having it placed into a trust in the Glazer's name. It becomes open land in the town's name. It is then up to the town. It is then up to the town to determine what to do with the land. And that does not necessarily mean, again, I'm not going to endear myself here, but I need to throw it out there. It does not necessarily mean it has to be given to Windswept Farms. and it would be up to the select board. And the select board could determine to sign a lease with the Mouses, thank you. But that's not our, we can suggest that. That is part of the pros and cons that Emily brought up earlier. But that is a, that really would end up being a suggestion on our part to the planning commission, who would then in turn recommend to the select board.
Okay, okay. Again, I don't want to point fingers, but I have concerns about what the future management of Williston might decide is of benefit to them versus what we currently see now. I mean, I think that you can take anybody who is either written in or who knows Windswept and say, this is a incredibly valuable resource. I mean, whether you're talking about participation of youth, of the people that board their horses there, but more importantly, it retains character of Williston, which is quickly evaporating, which again, this is in the residential zone is unheard of. And it's, so easily accessible to everybody. We don't argue that. But the point being is that moving forward, and when there's going to be perhaps a line of succession, what's going to happen to if there's like a change of heart with the board when you go, 10, 20, 30 years from now? That's where I'm saying that, having the town being fully in charge of making that decision, I don't think it's going to go that direction, the politics of the town, but look at the world we live in, you just don't know. That would be my concern, not based on current community sentiment, but where it's going. And the fact that the town management is basically dictating whether that the Windswept farm can continue to use that land or not. It's just,
Understand.
Yeah. Okay. That's it. I've laid it out as much as I possibly can. So I will mute myself now. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Ma'am? Your name and address, please.
I'm Robin Young. I live at 645 Brennan Woods Drive. I want to express my concern. I feel like there's a perception that Windswept is an elitist place and horses.
Could you say that one more time?
That Windswept and horses are an elitist sport and place. I'm concerned that there's a perception of that. I would challenge you, we could send you to a lot of horse places in Vermont that are elitist, and then have you come back to Windswept and you'll see that Windswept is not at all elitist. Tina and Mike make it possible for us average people to be able to afford horses and riding. And let me give you an example. I board a horse at Windswept. It's my daughter's horse. And when she's here in town, she's required to work to help pay for that horse. Mom and dad can't just pay for that horse. She currently is not in town. And so how do we afford this horse? There are 2 people leasing him, and they split the cost of the board and the shoeing. And I cover all the medical and special needs that the horse has, equipment or special grain. And so it's a 3-way partnership. And this is how we afford this. And, Tina and Mike help make this possible. They have helped me find people to lease the horse. They're advisors and supporters. And this is the culture at Windswept. We're not a bunch of snobby rich people. And I just wanted to bring this out because it's a concern that I have from reading the materials that are available online. I get the perception that some people perceive this as an elitist activity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next.
We have Pam Allen. Her hand is raised on Zoom.
Okay.
Hi, yes, I am Pam Allen. I also board a horse and my daughter's pony at Windswept. And I'm very disturbed that it sounds like that there is some feeling that Windswept is not a benefit to the community. So yes, I do feel very strongly about that. I interact with the kids there. I mean, there are a significant number of kids there. That question about how many people are at the barn or involved in the barn, literally thousands. Our family is involved in it. All the kids' families are involved with that. You know, it's not just one person. You usually have at least a person and their family involved there. And you know, the other thing that I find disturbing as well, like Robin, is that this whole elitist. I've heard that there is a perception that we are elitist, and I find that ridiculous, because we could be described as crazy. That's okay. That's perfectly acceptable. But we are definitely dedicated to taking care of each other and our horses. And I think this is a significant that Windswept has a significant part to play in the community. And my battery's dying, so I'll have to say goodbye.
Great, thank you.
Liz wants
Yes,
to-
I see the hand up. I can't see you. Come on up. Name and address, please.
Hi, my name is Olivia Siri. I live 232 Lefebvre Lane. And I'm an 8th grader at Williston Central School. I also lease a horse and board at Windswept. I wanted to say that I think that Windswept is very vital to our community. I work during the summer with Tina and Mike. And I also do chores Mondays and Wednesdays after school, which helps to pay for things for my horse, like shows or things that she might need that's extra. I am also part of a group, and I've done some read alouds at my school with younger kids, and it's really interesting to see that I'll have a group of kids, and I know every single one of them from working at summer camp. They're always really excited to know somebody. I've also helped out with what we call the pony party. And it was just really nice to see kids who were engaging in these activities that aren't on a screen, or I know I spend a lot of less time on my phone, which I appreciate because I'm around my horse and my friends, and I've built a really strong community. So I just want to say I'm very grateful for Windswept, and I think they're very vital to our community. That's really it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Liv, you want to tell them about the pony party?
Yeah. We had something it was targeted at a younger audience. We set up stations for arts and crafts. There was a photo booth, learning how to like be around horses. There was a selfie booth with a horse. And I was at a craft station, and we made headbands that looked like horses. We made, there was so much. It was really, really amazing. It was.
And how many kids came there?
Like, I think
It was like
we had-
300 or something.
Yeah.
It was last
Last April.
May, last April.
Yeah.
We wanted to open up because we knew that with COVID and everybody being stuck inside, we wanted everyone to be outside and run around and learn horses and learn outside and just have fun.
Yeah.
So every family created a station, and there were like, how many stations? 8?
Yeah, I think so.
There were 8 stations. I did a photo booth with a dress up, and they went in my trailer and dressed up, and then I photographed them, and you guys did, yeah, so it was fun.
Yeah, it's just taught me to deal with like.
It was a lot of work.
Yeah, I feel like I've learned how to deal with like a lot of real life situations. Like, like if there's ever any conflict, I've learned to work it out, and there's really not any. We all get along really well, but if there is, I've also learned like some like financial management just by having to pay for things for my horse. So I feel like I've just learned a lot. But that's all I wanted to say.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, I am Rory Jones. I actually live in Burlington, but due to windswept, I am able to connect with people that I never would have met in my entire life. So I own 2 horses, and I work with another one. I actually leased one of my horses out to one of my friends who's sitting over here, and it's a really great way to connect with them. Every summer I work at the summer camp, and it's really inspiring to me to take all this knowledge that I'm learning from riding my horse and, knowing things about my horse and teaching them to young kids who are the next generation of people who are going to live in the world. And I feel like I'm influencing them in some way. And was my first job. I've been working there since I was like 13. And not a lot of kids get to work at 13 years old and make money. And I think that the camp is really vital because, we have college students from UVM. A lot of people who work in with cows at UVM come to work there. There's adults that used to work at Windswept, and then there's kids like me who ride at Windswept now, and we all come together and we all learn how to work together. And there's no hierarchy because they're older than me, and there's no hierarchy for any reason. There's just, we all coexist together, and I'm able to work with people that are way different than me, and we all want the same thing. And I worked at the pony party, and I come there every single day after school. I have been doing that for the past 3 years, and it's given me a work ethic. I have something that I'm passionate about, and it influences a lot of kids. We see a lot of kids, they come after school every day and they gain the same work ethic that I have been able to gain.
You were there every day during COVID, actually.
Oh yeah, I was
Even though
there.
You probably shouldn't have been.
Even though I shouldn't have been, I was there like every day during COVID, taking care of my horse, avoiding school because it was a stressful time, but I was able to come to the barn and be myself. And if I didn't have horses, I don't know what I'd be doing with my life. But here.
Thank you.
Oh, what was your first name again?
Rory.
Rory.
R-O-R-Y.
R-O-R-Y. Cool. Thank you.
Other comments?
Folks in the room, yeah. And I will note that Alex Daly, the chair, just joined in on Zoom.
Thanks. Sorry, everybody. I had a bit of a small emergency there I had to deal with. I'll catch up as we go.
I'm Kathy Kime, 736 Sunset Hill Road, Williston. So been here for a long time. I've probably been involved with Windswept for quite 20 years. My daughter started at Windswept when she was, what, 5 or 6. She had to have a pony. They were around the corner, brought her in, couldn't get her out. She wrote this letter. I don't know if you had a chance to read it. She has a lot of scientific research about horses, how it helps mental issues, physical issues, hippotherapy, how a lot of towns are using horse farms and farms in general to help people through a lot of life challenges. When she started at 6, she was tiny. She was probably a 40-pound, tiny girl. We put her up against 800-pound pony, and she had to learn to be tough. She had to learn to assert herself. That carried her well through high school. She's now studying at Dartmouth in an MD PhD program. She was very much an advocate for herself through CVU and through her college years, very successful. And that all comes back to her deciding that I wanted the responsibility, I wanted the opportunity, which Mike and Tina gave to her. We currently have a horse there. We lease it out. We allow Mike and Tina to use the horse for lessons because we want kids to have the experience and to have the opportunity. And when I say kids, I mean anyone from age 4 to 90. Her community at the barn was that group. It was from kids her own age all the way to adults that were there, including a few folks-
92.
92 now, okay, and she still rides every day. But that was her world and that was her community. Those were her people. They still are. So it's intergenerational, but they're all kids at heart. So when we look at this, when we look at the barn, it's truly a community asset. And I think it's valued by the people who are there. When she was at Williston Central, she started walking to the barn every day after school. After a week, she had 5 of her friends walking with her instead of taking the bus. After a month, there were 7 kids. 2 of them just hung out to watch. So they actually formed a group where there were a bunch of kids, even in the winter, walking, talking, socializing, coming to the barn and then dropping off at their houses. So it was providing a community benefit, not necessarily on Windswept property, but the community getting there, using that as a focal point. So when we look at this asset and use, and if you read her letter, she'll describe what it meant to her. I think that for anyone from age 4 to 92, maybe 95, I don't know.
Maybe,
you
she's pretty
can use it.
strong.
And on the other side note, my son, he rode for all of 4 months. He decided it wasn't his thing, but he would be at the barn and he would help hay. And he would help if he needed to with any type of chore when it was needed. And I think their favorite memory was a Christmas morning where they had to go and do chores with Dad. They all got up early, did their chores, and then they came home. So that's intangible. So I just wanted to leave with that with you. The true asset for the full range of the community over a very wide age range. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Well, we have 15 minutes.
Hi, I'm Sue Roberts. I live at 270 Pleasant Acres Drive, which is right off Mountain View Drive. And I didn't come to Windswept Farm like a lot of kids did. I, didn't come to Williston until 2000. But I've been driving by Windswept Farm for all those years. And every summer, it would just be so bustling with activity. And I'm not a parent, I don't have kids. But I would always slow down and just watch because there was, everybody's grinning, everybody's got horses. And it was just such a positive impact on me because a lot of times, because I did 35 years in law enforcement, a lot of times I'm driving home and I'm not in the best mood. But that was just such a boost. And then I just one day said, I've got to meet these people and I want to see if I can get a job working here because I don't want to go to the gym, but I want to still maintain strength and all that other stuff. And they adopted me. And I was much older than everybody else there. And it just being there, you can feel your blood pressure go down. And like the young students have said, you actually feel like you belong. There's 7-year-olds. And even though I'm in my 60s, I still feel like I'm part of the group, and during COVID, Mike and Tina tried to figure out different things that we could do. And because we had the opportunity of open air, show a movie on the side of the barn and everybody's sitting outside and we have a fire and everybody's socially distanced, but we're all still together. That was wonderful. And another aspect is when we were talking about the elitist thing, an elitist barn just buys horses and sells them. And when they're no longer functional, you get rid of them. Not at Windswept. Old horses live out at Windswept, but they're still fully usable. Even if you can't take them to shows, even if they can't jump, the kids are still braiding their manes with wildflowers and they're still decorating the stall doors with chalk and they love these horses. And these horses have such full lives. It's just incredible. It is just, I mean, it's very emotional for me because I wound up attaching myself to one of those older horses because he wasn't being ridden. He was partially blind and he was wonderful. He's old Appaloosa, but he lived out his days. He was taken care of, you know, and I think that's really important in our throwaway society for people to see that. This is a functioning farm. We take care of everybody. Everybody has a value. And I feel like I have a value there, you know, so just thank you very much.
Thank you. Other comments? Sir.
Hi, Chris Long from 467 Wildflower Circle. One of my questions is, as I look at the map, I live in Wildflower Circle, and the current entrance for the southernmost portion of this development is currently projected to be right across from the entrance to Wildflower Circle. Was there any thought of trying to offset the entrances? Because I think that's going to be problematic.
So generally, I'll tell you right off the bat, generally that Public Works is going to want to see an entrance directly across from Wildflower Circle. Now, they will confirm that, but that would be the norm.
Even though you go up and
Yep.
down Old Stage and there's none other that are right across from each other.
Things are built out in different ways, but if they have their druthers, Ken, you want to, that's something in your wearing your prior hat, you want to confirm or disagree with that?
I would confirm it 100%. Bruce
Yeah.
is, that would be the first thing that Bruce would say. Bruce,
Absolutely.
For the
That's-
Public Works Director, if we had proposed what you had suggested, he would say, I want those two things
It
to
would
line up.
it would go down in flames.
It hasn't gone down flames for the other roads that have been put in. But
They all
it
went
would
in
go
at different times.
down. No, I think that's a problem. We've had discussions in our neighborhood.
Yeah.
That is going to be very problematic, especially at school times with people trying to get out of both neighborhoods. So
you feel free to contact Bruce Hoare.
But secondly, and probably more importantly, have we finished the discussion about the substantial benefit
No,
of this? Are we circling back to that in this?
we're going to
meeting?
run out of time.
Okay, because that's, I think, the most important thing. I'm
Absolutely.
a huge horse farm fan, but I am really concerned about this being accelerated, not following the standard procedure for development. So I'd like to circle back to that.
So-
I'll give up.
So that is a good point. The Planning Commission, through a vote of 3-2, determined that there was the possibility of substantial public benefit, thus seating this board to determine if that was the case. That's the answer to your question.
Okay,
Okay.
right, then I'll stop talking, because that's
So-
what I really want to hear, is
So-
what this discussion is on.
There is in the bylaw through this thing called a specific plan, there is a way to circumvent the development bylaw. And that's what this body is.
Yep.
That's
Okay,
it.
Great,
Okay.
thank you.
If I may,
Yep,
Scott,
please.
I think the word circumvent is
I knew you weren't gonna like that one.
is a little harsh.
It might be. It might be.
So there's a whole chapter in the bylaw. This is an alternative process.
I stand
It's been in the
corrected.
bylaw for, I don't know, close to 15 years.
Yeah, it's a tool similar to PUD, planned unit development, planned residential
I
development.
apologize. I stand corrected. You are correct. Yes, ma'am.
Kathy Khan again, 736 Sunset Hill. The open space on the northern border that's currently mapped between Old Stage and Mountain View, you indicated that would be a park. Is that correct? There was a parking area discussed.
It indicates the possibility of a public parking area. At the end of the day, this land will be provided to the town, as will the rec path within that as part of this. We have not decided yet whether or not we would require the applicant to build the parking area. That's put up as sort of a possibility there in design. But ultimately, the section you see in light green against Mountain View Road is the view shed that would be preserved as part of this and the path that would go through it, which is a path that is identified in the town plan, as is the view shed. Whether that becomes like a usable park is a separate conversation for the, select board and our recreation department and in that budget. As is right now, this is really just going to be preserved land with the rec path.
Could that possibly be left as open land and pasture land or hayland? I mean, you do have
Possible.
Catamount, Catamount is just down the road. They have parking and they have a lot of facilities at Catamount. I mean, I understand wanting a rec path maybe closer to the road like it is in the rest of the town, but could that space also be preserved as open?
Yeah, that is a possibility. We are encouraging the applicant to follow as closely as possible to the goals of the town plan. The town plan lays out the desire to have a more pedestrian-friendly, more walkable set of neighborhoods interconnected with recreation paths, and it identifies quite a few sort of key connector areas that I would like to see finished. This is one of those areas. So we really are encouraging the applicant to kind of stick with that plan. The town plan, of course, is up for revision in the near future. So I would invite you to come to the Planning Commission meetings and provide that input to the Planning Commission in general. I think this commission is really focused on whether this benefit is going to be offset for that increase of development and whether this plan sort of fits with the overall character of the town plan as designed today.
All right, thank you.
It looks like Abby Marshall raised her hand on Zoom.
Hi, yeah, so I'm Abby Marshall, also Abby Keim. I'm in the process of changing my name. I used to live at 376 in Williston and now live in Windsor. I just wanted to ask a question because I think this plan would provide substantial benefit if it allows Windswept to continue operating. But without that contingency of the farm still being operational, I'm not convinced it provides substantial benefit to Williston. So I was wondering if there's any sort of legal mechanism where you could link the sustainability of the farm to this plan, because I'm a little bit concerned about just giving the town this open space and then waiting for them to decide what to do with it, when I think the real benefit from the specific plan we're seeing on the screen now is potentially allowing Windswept to keep operating. So I just wanted to ask about that.
So I will allow me to just touch on that for a second. One of the things that I believe, I'm going to speak for myself, and anybody on the board can chime in whether you agree or disagree. I think you bring up an important point. Windswept Farm is a private enterprise. The town is not a private enterprise. It is my opinion that the town, through what you just suggested, can't directly give or support the land to Windswept Farm. It's a private entity. It's a private enterprise. They're in business. They could thrive. They could go bankrupt. The town's charter is not to support a single private enterprise. That opens up a hornet's nest of problems down the road when other people stick their hands up and want something from the town. What I think in this case, and again, I am speaking as a single board member, what I think in this case is that we all need to be aware of is that the applicant, the Glazers, are considering giving land to the town. The select board then can decide what to do with that land. This board can make the recommendation to the Planning Commission, who in turn will make a recommendation to the select board that they could lease it to Windswept Farm for a period of time. And then they, at some point, they could redetermine whether to continue the lease, or they could have options, and that is something that can be hammered out. But the towns, it is not in the town's best interests to start supporting a business any more than they would support all businesses. That is a very slippery slope. There ends my editorial for the night, but anybody else on the board wish to chime in on that?
I'll add to that, Scott. And by the way, thank you, Scott, for those comments. Those were very well put, and thank you for chairing in my absence, which I'll ask you to keep doing, if you will, since you're there in person and can read the room a little better. Emily, can you actually bring back up the document you just pulled up? Because I just want to point out, and I think you brought this up for exactly that reason, item 5 on here, that one of the substantial benefits that is considered under the specific plan process is this item. It's a little far zoomed in, but to protect working landscapes. And I would consider, you know, the horse farm and its grazing activity in that working landscape, while it's not explicitly called out. I think the examples here sort of point out. So I do think that there is some value, you know, and again, I'm speaking for myself, not on behalf of this whole committee. I personally see that between the preservation of the view along Mountain Road, the preservation of the scenic view shed that is that area on the south of the proposed development where Windswept Farm and the wetlands are, but also protecting it as a working landscape. I think that really helps to sort of maintain the character of the town, which is the goal here. And so, you know, whether or not that is long-term managed by Windswept Farm, whether through the town's actions or Windswept Farm's actions, it may be that the town offers them a lease and they choose to close down for business reasons or anything else. I do think that there is a benefit to the town in preserving these parcels and preserving them with the intent to use them. But as Scott very well pointed out, it's a question before this board, before this committee, how far we want to go in making the specific plan contingent upon that lease agreement. And I think I am leaning the same way that Scott is, that I do not want to get into a position of sort of making anything more than a recommendation to the select board, whose job it is really to work out that. Obviously, what we are looking for in saying that is for this to continue, but I don't think that this particular board nor the planning commission is in a position to say we can require that as part of the specific plan. At least that's where I'm leaning today. But I do understand and appreciate the feedback, and that we are listening to it and hearing it. It's more of a question of how far should we as representatives of the town go in encouraging or requiring that particular action in terms of developing this plan. And I do think this plan, even absent that, if you just take Windswept Farm off the table, I do think that there is a substantial benefit in preserving that landscape.
Okay.
So really, sorry, I just wanted to clarify. So really the most that this board can do is recommend to the select board to maintain it as a working landscape.
Correct.
The most this board can do is recommend to the select board everything in this plan. At the end of the specific plan process would be the planning commission voting to send the specific plan to the select board for adoption. So everything in this plan is ultimately a recommendation that goes to the select board, who will ultimately ratify that. So I have that correct, Emily?
Yes, and I would add recommending it for the continued use of windswept and making sure as the site plan evolves and then any supplemental bylaw amendments for it, that the door continues to stay open for Windswept Farms use through how the subdivision is laid out.
We are at the end of our allotted time. Is there anybody else in the audience that has that you didn't get a chance to speak and would like to? Anybody online?
Folks online, remember to raise your hand on the toolbar or let me know in the chat if you'd like to speak.
Okay. One more time. Okay. So we are at the end of our allotted time of 6:30. We did not get to the growth management calculation and discussion. We will do that first thing next meeting. Do we have a time that you would, can we accelerate the meeting? Because at this point, the deliverables are sitting in front of us. I don't think we need to wait.
We could do next week. We could do 2 weeks, really.
2 weeks. Works
I
for
would be
me.
comfortable going to next week and then getting back on the 2 week after that. That would put us back on the schedule we were on. We skipped a week here for break. Would everybody here be comfortable doing one next week, one the week thereafter, and then getting back to 2 weeks just so we can move this forward?
So next week meeting, Thursday, the 16th, just to be specific.
Correct.
Fine by me.
Yeah.
Everybody else on the board?
Yeah, that works.
Thursday, the 16th, 5 o'clock. Opening growth management discussion, growth management scoring discussion.
All right, so we don't have additional deliverables, just to want to make sure that we're,
Yeah, I think I'll keep all the same
No, I
agenda
think
items, all the same
I don't think so.
materials. yeah.
Nothing additional has been requested.
how many days does the agenda have to be posted before the meeting?
Technically 48 hours, but I think we could probably get it out, tomorrow if we're just gonna do.
And
Growth
again,
management.
in this room again, or at the,
I think so. I think this worked well.
Okay.
Feels more spacious and I got the audio to work now for Zoom, barring the TV man killing me next week. We'll see.
All right, that sounds good. Sounds like we have a plan.
Cool. All right, thanks everybody on Zoom. This meeting will be posted online as a recording.
Thank
let
you,
you know.
everybody, for your comments. We really do appreciate them. We do hear them. We're listening to them, take them into account. We appreciate everybody sharing them. And you probably will need to share some of them again with the select board if this plan moves forward to recommendation. So thank you.
okay, and at 6:35, we're going to close this meeting. Thank you, everybody. Thank you all.
Thank you.